I don't know if anyone's looked at the research or the data, but right now by we, I mean DirecTV, is losing out to subscription services. We're losing out to Netflix. We're losing to Hulu. I said, it's only going to get worse. And I said, in any business, you either adapt or you die. And as soon as the words were out of my mouth, Kurt's just like, no, Alex, you need to stop right there. You have a negative attitude. You're trying to neg everybody out. You just need to stick to the system, and everything will be fine. The market's totally fine. The market hasn't changed. You've changed. And I'm just like, Kurt, how can you ignore what is clearly in front of our faces?
So, Alex, how long were you in the business?
I was in the business, I'd say 6 to 8 months. I first started in the business in February of 2015 and left in the late summer of 2015.
Okay, and did you reach team leader?
In a de facto kind of sense.
Okay.
The offices I worked with, they weren't that good, to be very honest. So it was just us, a bunch of CSRs that constantly came in and out. And I was there, me and another guy were there the longest. So even though we didn't have the title of account manager / team leader, we were kind of the de facto team leaders for the offices.
Okay. In your letter to us, you said that you worked in central Pennsylvania for 2 offices, and we'll get to some of these offices here in a minute, and one of your promoting owners that I want to talk about. You said you sold DirecTV in Best Buy, Walmart, and Sam's Club. So you were on the sign-ups side of Smart Circle, not products. And so first, before we get any further, tell me a little bit about that experience. What were some of the things, looking back now, since it's been a few years, what were some of the things that stuck out to you about that day-to-day selling experience?
Really, it was so impersonal. I'm a pretty outgoing guy. I'm a pretty friendly guy. And I'm pretty chill. I'm pretty laid back. I don't like to pressure people into doing anything that I don't feel comfortable doing myself. And especially, as I'm sure you know, with not just DirecTV, but also Dish Network, Comcast, or whatever your regional cable provider may be, subscription services are down, mainly because of the emergence of Netflix, Hulu, and now Disney+. Yep. And that, what I was in, was right in the beginning of the decline of subscription services. So it was really difficult to convince people, hey, give up, Netflix, Hulu, and whatever TV service you have, and come on over to DirecTV, where, your first year will be relatively affordable, but then, oh, guess what? Your second year is going to be more than all of those combined.
Right. And I've thought about that, because I've noticed in several people I've talked to, they've said that the sign-ups market is kind of expanding while the products market is deflating. But I've also noticed, I've gotten messages from a lot more people that I know personally, who've told me that they're in the store today. So it's almost like they might be feeling the effect of the increase in streaming, which it makes perfect sense, because I know very few people who have a system anymore like Comcast or DirecTV. They want to pick and choose what they want. So yeah, I'm curious as to see what the fallout from that is going to be. Were there any discussions about that in your office, about different approach or anything like that because of the streaming?
As I'm sure you know from your experience and from talking to other people, admitting to reality is not exactly looked at fondly.
Right.
Nor is saying anything that may remotely rock the boat. And we'll get into it later, I'm sure. My promoting owner and the owner of my office that I worked for at the time, and along with myself and a few other people, we had a phone conference because our sales were terrible. And we were just like, hey, what's going on? What can we do differently? And I had mentioned, the rise of streaming services and how in DirecTV, we had already seen a 5% decline in just that year. And it was going to be at least 5% year over year going forward. And I said, look, this isn't a sustainable market. I said, now, I don't have a business degree, really any degree for that matter, but it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that in business, you either adapt or you die.
Right.
And they're like, no, stick to the system. The market's fine. The market's not dry. It's fine the way it is. Just stick to the script, stick to the process. You'll be fine. And that's when it was like, okay, maybe I need to look into this a little bit more critically than I had.
Yeah. I think, and that's, I wish him luck, but I mean, you can really only defy logic for so long. I mean, it's almost like at this point trying to sell CDs and VHS cassettes. I mean, you're not going to make it in this current.
Or trying to sell Zune to iPod users.
So I don't know. We'll see what happens. But maybe that's why. Maybe they are going more with the store with the products. 'Cause you can always use products. When we don't have the services, you can still use cleaners and muscle packs and all that other garbage they sell. So when you, in your message, you said, and I just want to highlight this for anyone who might stumble across this video and is not sure how they got here or is not sure if they can believe this series, but you said, quote, "Everything in the documentary was spot on and took me back to when I did this awful work." So first, why would you call it awful? Because this is supposed to be such a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. And secondly, what were some of the things that when you saw the slave circle, you were able to immediately relate to?
The reason I would call it awful is because it robs you of who you are, and tries to force you into this box of what the business says you are or says you should be and what you should become. Mm-hmm. And then in addition, the sticking to the script, sticking to the process, it really doesn't allow for any kind of creative thought. It doesn't allow for any critical thinking. I mean, one thing that sticks out to me most, even 5 years later, I'm nearly 30 years old, and I still remember this, was one day being in the field, and the terminology still flows naturally, but being out in the field and trying to convince some guy to come to my table and talk about DirecTV, and being screamed at, being told you're the worst person on the face of the earth. And that took me back. It's like, am I really that terrible? I think I'm an okay guy. Yeah. I mean, I know I'm not a patron saint, but geez, I'm not that terrible, am I? But it really just tears you down, and it's for a purpose. So the company, so the Smart Circle or whoever it is, Cydcor, whatever it may be, can essentially build you in their image to where you know nothing else.
Yeah, I would agree. I think anyone who's worked in it for a decent amount of time will tell you that pretty much everything, you get to a point where everything all your thought is in the systems. And like you said, there's an absence of critical thought because critical thought answers questions, and they don't want questions to be answered. They don't want you to dig at all. Before we signed on, you talked about your two owners. So at one point you had one of two owners. You identified one as Mike and one as Sam, one of which for sure is not in the business anymore. But as you were in the office and getting to know these individuals, did they seem like they were making the money that they were supposed to be, which was six figures? What were some of the things that stood out about your owners?
Well, for Mike, let's start off with him. He was my first owner. I actually interviewed with him initially. Walking into the office, it was kind of odd because and I'm sure this is probably universal to some extent, but it was a small office, pretty nondescript. And just going into his office, it was a nice office, a nice desk, wearing a nice suit, nice tie. Just very confident in himself, held himself confidently, saying, hey, this is the opportunity. Mm-hmm. And just having that air of, hey, I'm making it. And if I can make it, you can too. And at the time, I was in a position where I had to move out of my mother's home. And the job I had at the time wasn't enough to cover, rent and utilities and expenses, plus student loans from dropping out of college. Mm-hmm. So I had to find work to pay the bills, make ends meet. So whenever I met him and, being told, hey, you can start out here, but you can move up if you want. And to me, that sounded great because working two jobs, nobody wants to work two jobs. Right. But it's like, hey, if this guy can make it, I can make it too. So sure, let's do this. But there's definitely the air of, you can easily start out making $400 to $600 a week. go up to account manager, make 800 a week. Once you build up your team, is how it was worded to me. Get you to assistant manager. I'll teach you the ropes. You'll be making 1,000 a week, and then I'll promote you out. You'll have your own office. You'll be making at least 50 to 60K, easy. And I was like, okay. And for a kid from Central Pennsylvania who didn't really know what it was like to be comfortable with money, that was like, oh, I can live comfortably.
Yep.
I can, provide for myself. I can provide for my family. It was very appealing. And looking back, it's definitely a pitch that they throw at you every single day.
Yeah, they're selling, for as much as they're selling products and services to customers, they're selling the opportunity to all of you, for sure.
Absolutely.
All right, so for those watching, we had a technological malfunction, so we had to re-record the second half of our interview on another day here. That's why at least Alex is wearing different clothing than I am. But anyway, so Alex, you were talking about your owners, Mike and Sam, but then you also were talking about one of their promoting owners, Kurt, who actually we are a little bit familiar with because we have had an interview that has brought him up before. So first, I just kind of wanted to get your impressions of Kurt. Did you meet him, and what were some of the interactions that you had with him while you were in the business?
While I was in the business, actually, whenever I first joined Happy Valley Marketing Group, which was the first business per se that I worked for, Kurt was kind of this mythological creature that everybody talked about, but you never really saw or heard of. We use his full name. His full name was Kurtis Spahr. I had learned through talking to Mike that he was the one who opened up our office initially, then promoted Mike and Sam, who then split the office into the State College, Pennsylvania, and Altoona markets, and then Kurt moved to a different region. I didn't actually meet Kurt in person until we made it was pitched to us very well. It was pitched to us as a business trip to our sister office in South Bend, Indiana, where I believe it was KJL Marketing. I believe was the office he was managing at the time. We went there. I actually got to meet Kurt. Very charismatic individual. Very, very nice person. Just meeting somebody like that, you wouldn't think that he'd be doing this kind of work. He just seems like a normal guy doing his thing. Got to go into his home. It was very nice from what I remember. Granted, it was 5 years ago, and I've kind of blocked a lot of it out since. But it was a very nice home. Everything was neat and tidy and orderly. But in the back of my head, I'm thinking, wait, if this guy is an office manager making, $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 a year, why is he living in a townhouse and not in like a really nice house that I wish I had? But I just kind of blew it off. I was like, he's probably just, a very frugal person. So my office and KJL, we kind of, worked together for a week. Excuse me. Worked together for a week. I got to go into different stores, which was pretty interesting. But unbeknownst to me, that while we were there in South Bend, it wasn't to figure out what we were doing wrong as an office. It was more of a meeting between my manager, Mike, and Kurt as far as what to do with the office because we were failing. And I would say it was probably around the middle of the week. When I was like, hey, Mike, what's going on? I haven't seen you out in the field. Are you all right? And he's like, well, between you and me, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm out. And he was like, Kurt and I are negotiating terms for what to do with the office. And I was like, oh, okay, cool, I guess. We then had a meeting later that day or later in the week. Excuse me. Where it was Mike and Sam meeting with us, our office, basically saying, hey, you have a couple different options. Whatever option you choose is up to you. You can either stay in South Bend and work for Kurt. You can either come back to Pennsylvania and, we'll keep going on. We'll right the ship. or if you want to cut ties and, go a different path, which I found to be somewhat unusual. And looking back, it's kind of shocking because nobody just gives you an out in this business.
Yeah.
He was like, if you don't want to be in this anymore, say it now and we'll get you home. And that's kind of how I met Kurt and what kind of started the first seed of doubt.
I've done some research on Kurt, and I've noticed that he doesn't stay in the same place for too long. Like you mentioned, Happy Valley in Pennsylvania, and then he moved on to KJL Marketing in South Bend, closer to my area. And then after a couple years there, Metroplex Management, Dallas, Texas. Then a couple years there, Valley Management Group in Tempe, Arizona, which as far as I know is where he is still today. So did you kind of get the sense that maybe he... I don't know, like he wasn't long for a certain place, or what do you think you can attribute that to?
The way it was pitched to me, I don't know if it was told to other people in the office like this, but the way it was presented to me was he's this Maverick guy. He's and I'm sure this name has come up quite a bit. He's kind of Bill Bishop's protege. Bill Bishop being, at the time he was a regional consultant. By now, I'm sure he's national consultant by now. And, it was like he's this Maverick guy who, just opens offices and kicks ass. But looking back, with, hindsight always being 2020, Kurt's being in this business isn't smart, but Kurt's not dumb. I have no evidence to back this up. It's purely, coincidental and circumstantial. But my theory is that Kurt opens an office in a new market, does very, very well for himself, is able to train people up in the system, and at the first sign that things are starting to go south, he promotes someone up. And traditionally, what you're told as a manager, what was being told to me as kind of a de facto account manager, being groomed for management, was that you'll be promoted out. Well, Kurt didn't promote people out. He promoted people up, and then he got out. So my theory is that at the first sign of things going south, he promoted someone up and got out. So that whenever things went south in that market, he could say, well, it's your fault. You messed it up. I left it in good shape. If you want to say that, he's kind of crack the code in how to be successful in this business, you can. He goes from one place to the next and doesn't stay long.
Yeah, I mean, you say that's pure speculation, but just based on the ethical persona of the people that are in this business, it sounds like that might be the case. Maybe he has figured it out. And in our earlier conversations, you had talked about a phone call that you were on with, I think it was with Kurt, and was it with Mike? And to you, this phone call, I guess, was kind of a major eye-opener for you in terms of things that you hadn't seen before. Would you mind taking us through that call?
Yeah, sure. I'm actually going to start a little bit earlier than the initial phone call, because I feel like this bit is relevant to my whole story. I would say maybe the exact time frame. Excuse me, the exact time frame when this happened, I don't exactly remember. Again, it's been 5 years ago, and I've kind of blocked a lot out. I was given the opportunity to interview someone on their second interview, and as I'm sure the first interview is with the office manager, and the second is with someone out in the field. And I was told, hey, if this person decides to stay on, they'll be part of your team, and you can start training them, start building a team. Okay, cool. This person I interviewed, I don't remember her name. I barely remember her face, which is awful. But I just remember, showing her how the day-to-day went, and then pulling her off to the side and showing her the breakdown of the business, saying, hey, at entry level, you're going to make $400 to $600 a week. At account manager, $800 to $1,000, and so on. The whole time in the back of my head thinking, this is all bullshit. I'm not making $400 to $600 a week. Why am I telling this poor soul that she can make this much money? And she did stay on. She did accept the offer and the opportunity, but she didn't stick around long, probably because she figured it out right quick and got out. Um, and that made me feel awful because I try to do things the right way. I try to do everything I can without misleading someone. And that was the first time in my adult life where I felt that I truly misled somebody intentionally, to where I knew the truth and I was selling someone a lie. Um, Fast forward a couple weeks and the infamous phone call. Um, excuse me. So at the time, we were not making many sales. I think our office as a whole maybe average between 5 to 10 sales a week, which is not good. Um, so Kurt called in. It was a big conference call. Kurt was just like, "Hey, what's going on? I want to get the feel for for what you guys are feeling, what you guys are thinking." I just kind of hung back and let everybody else talk. It was, as I'm sure everybody watching this video who's been in the business knows, all the lingo. Oh, things are still juicy. There's still opportunities out there. We just got to bide our time. Blah 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 blah. The whole time everybody's talking, I'm looking at, I'm thinking, doing the right thing, doing my homework, looking at what's going on in the current market. At the time, this is what, 2020 now? It was 2014, 2015 back then. That was just, obviously Netflix was a thing, but it's not as big as it is now. But it was definitely starting to grow. So much so that major TV subscription services were beginning to notice, to the point where it was like 5 to 8% loss in their customer retention year over year. And one of them, of course, being DirecTV, who I am selling. So when it came time for me to speak up, I said, okay, well, I don't know if anyone's looked at the research or the data, but right now by we, I mean DirecTV, is losing out to subscription services. We're losing out to Netflix. We're losing to Hulu. I said, it's only going to get worse. And I said, in any business, you either adapt or you die. And I said, am I being a little dramatic? Yeah, probably. But does that lessen the impact of what I'm trying to say? No. Because I said, give it a few years. Netflix is going to be bigger. Hulu is going to be bigger. And what we're doing is going to be less and less relevant. So I said, we need to come up with some kind of strategy to use what's hurting us either as an advantage or trying to find something else where we can be profitable. Because right now, it's only going to get worse. And as soon as the words were out of my mouth, Kurt's just like, no, Alex, you need to stop right there. You have a negative attitude. You're trying to neg everybody out. You just need to stick to the system, and everything will be fine. The market's totally fine. The market hasn't changed. You've changed. And I'm just like, Kurt, how can you ignore what is clearly in front of our faces? USA Today, U.S. News and Reports, Consumer Reports, New York Times, it's all there. And I said, Kurt, I'm not somebody with a college degree, but you are. You went to college. You should know the value of doing market research and looking at the data. Data doesn't lie. People do. And he was just like, no, you need to stick to the script, stick to the system, everything will be fine. The market hasn't gotten dry. The market hasn't changed. Just do what we do and you'll be fine. And that was the first, I would say it wasn't the first, but it was definitely another factor that made my snowball of doubt much bigger.
Yeah, because up until the time you thought you were actually selling DirecTV, not selling like this cult mindset of make us money regardless. Because, you're exactly right. Like it's you can only doubt reality for so long, and maybe that's why he does travel from territory to territory as much as he does, is because he's not willing to see the reality of it. He's just banking on the fact that these systems, which don't work, these systems are supposed to work wherever and regardless of what's happening in reality, it'll get him through. But yeah, that's crazy.
It's either he chooses to ignore reality, or he knows the truth. He knows that what we're doing isn't sustainable. And that ties back into my theory that he knows that as soon as whatever market he's in is starting to go down, to get the heck out of Dodge.
Yeah.
Again, he's not dumb. He may, say the to the company line, but he's not dumb.
Mm-hmm.
He knows how to play the game.
Right. In our first interview, you had talked about, I asked a question about kind of like you going through the whole process, and one of the things you talked about was your first owner, Mike, was very similar to you. And you talked about how you were, to use some of your words, you were just a kid in your 20s. You had never been in a situation where you were financially comfortable. You were looking for a way to provide because you had student loans, you had all these bills. So you were in a sense the perfect prey for one of these companies. Is there any way in your mind, looking back now, is there any way that someone else who might be in your same situation, who's looking for something and is offered this incredibly sounding opportunity which leads to nothing, is there any way to kind of guard against getting sucked into it for as long as, say, a Kurt has been, who, and that's all he knows now. He'll never do anything else. He's going down with the ship if it goes down. Is there any way you think that can be more guarded against?
I mean, to use a phrase that we've all heard several times, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. But at the same time, these owners, and not just the owners, but the businesses that Smart Circle uses to do the job postings, because the owners don't necessarily do the job postings on their own. Some do, some don't. As I'm sure if anybody has watched these videos and has seen the videos where owners talk about it, they don't necessarily control the postings. They just pick and choose, hey, this is what I want to do it. This is generally what I want to say. They don't have control over it. If you see something that says like, sports-minded people or, management training program, red flags should start to go up. And that's actually how I got suckered in. Because at the time, again, I was a kid in my early to mid-20s, not really sure what I wanted to do. And I saw the ad that said, sports-minded individual, looking for business opportunities. Mm-hmm. I totally misread that. And it's very easy to do. Yeah. Whenever you see that, especially in a college town, like State College with Penn State University, you're thinking, oh, sports-minded individuals, oh, I'm doing sports marketing, or I'm doing some marketing for something. And that's how I got suckered in. Because I didn't go in trying to figure out exactly what this job offers. With my current job, I'm a dispatcher for a local home improvement company. The job posting was very clear. My position was very clearly stated. My day-to-day duties were very clearly stated. My schedule, very clearly stated. No buzzwords, nothing there to get you jazzed. It was there to give you the information and say, basically, this is the job. If you're interested, apply. These postings from Smart Circle and these other offices that owners own, even though they really don't own their business, they won't tell you what you're going to be doing from day to day. They'll just be like, hey, we represent, very large clients to get out their message, which could mean a variety of things, but it's usually going to mean you're going to be in a big box store or going door to door. Mm-hmm. I had loved to start my own office while I still had my own doubts. Mm-hmm. I had started working with a guy in our office. His name was Rob. I don't remember his last name. I don't even know what he does anymore. Mm-hmm. He and I got talking. We're like, hey, we're not going to get promoted out where we are now. At this point, we were both like, hey, we both need money. And at the time, I had no car because my car got repossessed because it wasn't making money. So I had to make the decision, do I pay my car and get to where I need to go, or do I pay my rent and have a place to sleep? So Rob and I were talking, we're like, hey, let's see what we can do to convince Bill Bishop to believe in us as people and essentially front us the initial startup costs to open up our own office, and we're going to do our own thing. So I was like, yeah, sure, let's. And this was a conversation that mind you, sounds like it happened over the course of the day, but it wasn't. It was a conversation that occurred over the course of several weeks, where we both shared, how we felt, our concerns. But eventually, we're like, okay, let's do this. I said, I don't feel comfortable talking to Bill because I don't really know him that much. I don't know him well. But at the same time, without actually telling Rob, I had also begun having more and more doubts about this business. I didn't want to talk to Bill and essentially have, just be brainwashed even more and just be further in the shit than I already was. So I was like, all right, never mind. I'll call Bill and we'll get this figured out. So about a week later, Rob and I are talking, and he's like, well, got some news. Not a lot of it good. Turns out that Bill Bishop is hesitant to front us the startup costs for the office. It's not how, in Bill Bishop's words, it's not how it's done. You need to follow the system. So we pressed a bit more. And eventually Bill said, no, I'm not going to front you the money. And you need to stick to the system and do it the way the system tells you to do it. Because it works, obviously, because I'm a regional consultant. So, I did something right, or the system works. Either that or I'm a liar. And I'm thinking to myself, you're a liar. But that's whenever I started doing more research into exactly who I was working for. I forget exactly what made me look up Smart Circle, but I heard in conversation or saw on a review someone mentioning Smart Circle. So I was like, who are these people? So I did more research, and then it was just like the light went on, where I was like, oh, this is who I work for. And I've done more research since the last time we spoke. Smart Circle got its roots from a company back in the 80s called DS Max.
Yep.
Who did exactly what Smart Circle does now. Problem is, DS Max was doing things illegally at the time, so they got split. And now, thanks to legislation essentially making certain kinds of pyramid schemes legal, that is what now has brought us to where we have Smart Circle, APCO, Credico, or wherever it is. And now, here we are. And then I was like, oh my God, these are the people that I'm working for, people that have been scamming people just like me since the 80s.
Yep. And
there's maybe a handful of people who've done well, and it's because they got in early, just like a pyramid scheme. You get in early, you build the stack below you, and that's how you make money. And everyone else below you, they're screwed.
Yep. There's really no other way to look at the design of it. If it looks like a pyramid scheme, it sounds like a pyramid scheme, smells like a pyramid scheme. Maybe in legal language, it is not technically a pyramid scheme, but usually when there's smoke, there's fire.
Exactly.